Kazakhstan's biggest city, Almaty, today, a body in the road, a group of young men being held by Kazakh security forces. Thugs and terrorists, according to the government, which released this footage. And here's the evidence. When the police search the car they'd been chasing, they find an array of weaponry, including automatic rifles and pistols. Today, Kazakh troops were on the streets of Almaty again, dealing with sporadic protests. But in an extraordinary admission, the president said his forces are not strong enough.
The terrorist mobs are essentially international. They underwent serious training abroad, and their attack of Kazakhstan can be and should be viewed as an act of aggression.
Russian troops headed to Kazakhstan this morning. President Tokayev called on the Collective Security Treaty Organization, a regional military alliance led by Russia, to help him restore order. President Putin was only too happy to oblige, to show his determination to quell dissent at home and in the near abroad. Kazakhstan, the world's largest landlocked country, is sandwiched between China and Russia. The Russian-led Collective Security Treaty Organization includes the former Soviet states of Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Belarus and Armenia, some of which will send troops. In Minsk, another leader was equally delighted to send soldiers to Kazakhstan after recently violently quelling an uprising at home.
In the name of Belarusians, I just want to address these, some call them hoodlums, but all these different kind of protesters. I say to them, cut it out. That's enough.
They're responding to scenes like this overnight, when mobs of youths looted shopping centres in Almaty and others had running battles with security forces on the streets. At least 2 policemen were reportedly beheaded. The police said they liquidated dozens of protesters. The message of earlier demonstrations, when people were peacefully calling for political change, was drowned out by gunfire.
I think it's very, very important not to pack and not to generalize these protests as just the rioters, just the violent elements, or as the president calls them, terrorists. I think there are a lot of different groups out there who went to the streets in hopes, that the political change would be possible. There are a lot of ordinary people who were protesting peacefully, who had no guns.
Even today in the western city of Aktau, women and men were rallying peacefully, calling for political reform, protesting against the extraordinary gap between the wealth of Kazakhstan's political class and the poverty of ordinary people. And where is this man, Nursultan Nazarbayev, president for 30 years and still seen as the power behind the throne? Oliver Stone made an adulatory film about him. But this week, protesters have been shouting, "Old man, go." Foreign leaders overlooked his autocratic tendencies because Kazakhstan is such an important oil producer. His family owns millions of pounds worth of property in London. It's not clear if he's still in Kazakhstan. Today, Almaty City Hall was still burning after yesterday's attack. President Tomayev's residence was also badly damaged, an assault on the symbol of his power. In the last few hours, Russian troops have been filmed landing in Almaty. Who knows how long they'll stay? The Kazakh government has revealed its own weakness by outsourcing the restoration of law and order.
Well, joining me now is Kate Mallinson, Associate Fellow for the Russia and Eurasia Programme at Chatham House. What do you think is underneath what we're seeing? Is this a coalition of different people on the streets? Because the Kazakh officials are talking about terrorists and outside infiltrators who have come from foreign countries, whereas the protesters are talking about ordinary people.
Yes, I think it's an extremely complex situation that's been evolving in Kazakhstan over the last 4 days. Nothing is ever black and white in this complicated region. And I think how we need to look at it is to see that a small protest that started because of an increase in liquefied petroleum gas for cars has now then turned into a nationwide protest against the ruling Nazarbayev family, who we have heard today that they have fled the country. And now what we are seeing in Almaty is the public protest being co-opted by criminal elements and elite figures who do not want to lose control of the country. So it's happened so quickly, and the whole country has changed so hugely over the last 4 days, because by seeing the end of the Nazarbayev family, we are seeing the end of the family who controlled the whole economy, the whole political economy for the last 30 years. And we have to remember that Kazakhstan is home to some of the largest oil and gas and mineral reserves globally. For example, it controls 40% of the world's uranium production. And all of this was partly in the hands of the Nazarbayev family, who are no longer there, although there are elements of the family who are trying to remain in power.
So there is a post-Soviet military alliance arriving on the ground now. So how do we see the geopolitics of this? I mean, it's very different, isn't it, to how we look at Ukraine and Belarus, given the proximity of China?
Yes, because of Kazakhstan's geographical location, Nazarbayev had to be very astute and careful about his foreign policy. And unfortunately, this was one of his few achievements, in my opinion, was that he managed to balance China, the West, and Russia extremely well, considering how tied historically Kazakhstan is to Russia. This was an incredibly important achievement that he undertook. But overnight, the incumbent President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, has undone all this good work by asking Russia to send in troops. And what's really important is to remember that Kazakhstan, over the last few years, has been moving away from Russia, and the population have become much more nationalistic. So we already have a very difficult security situation, a protest against the government. But coming into this, we have Russians, and these people, the majority of the protesters were very peaceful and are peaceful. But once the Russian troops hit soil and possibly harm some of their fellow Kazakh citizens, the security situation could really escalate out of control.
Kate Mallinson, thank you very much indeed.